everyone, and welcome. My name is Brian Iinuma. Our company is Strategic Systems Group. We are a Los Angeles-based IT consulting firm and experts in enterprise resource planning. We help clients who are concerned about having too much or too little inventory, concerned about operational and financial visibility, and wasted time and effort in their organizations. I have with me my friend and colleague, Mr. Peter Moore. Peter, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Peter Moore, president of Wild Oak Enterprises in Santa Monica, and we work with CIOs and their senior leadership teams to help them evolve the IT function from a cost center support role to a strategic partner role that directly contributes to new revenues, margins, and profits. We help them understand that leveraging digital technology is the primary business value contributor to that successful journey.
Terrific, thank you. Our topic for today is the war on talent, and you wrote a very interesting article. You can't win customers if you can't win the war on talent. So let's delve into that a little bit today. So one of the things that you mentioned in the article is the cost. So how do you quantify the cost of that sort of issue in a client organization?
Yeah, so there have been a couple of interesting studies, Brian. The first was by PwC, and they did a very exhaustive study across the US market. And it's their estimate that the talent shortage and skills gap, just in US companies alone between now and 2030, could result in the loss of $8.5 trillion in revenue. And in the work that I do with a number of CIOs and their teams, they're constantly trying to figure out how to identify and recruit new skills. For example, we've talked in earlier webcasts about artificial intelligence. Okay, that's not a native understanding for most people in IT. This is recent. And so there's not a lot of talent today that a company can draw on. And the bigger companies with higher resources can pay more. And so the smaller companies are a real disadvantage. So part of it is being able to understand what the new skills are and capabilities you need. Secondly, is trying to find a way to recruit those. And we can talk more about that throughout this conversation.
It's very helpful. We've often had conversations about this notion about running the business versus changing the business. So what kind of talent is needed to run the business versus change the business?
Yeah, I mean, historically, IT has been it's engineering driven, it's very logical, it's step by step. They use a waterfall development process where you plan, build, and run, all of which under normal circumstances prior to digital disruption work just fine. The problem with those sort of legacy approaches is they take a long time, and they're pretty complex, and in many cases they're very expensive. But the biggest issue is they don't move fast enough. And today, as you know, with the speed of new digital technology disrupting operating models and business models and processes and programs across companies, you can't compete if you can't become more agile and move faster. So what you need to be able to do is to think about what you're doing and say, look, we don't need a fully, a big end result. Let's go do some experiments. So how do we take artificial intelligence? Okay, first and foremost, what's the problem we're trying to solve, and can artificial intelligence help? But we have to learn. We don't know very much about it. And the way we learn is to do experiments. So find small things, maybe internally. How do we use artificial intelligence to make our employees more productive? How do we use artificial intelligence to make our contact centers more efficient and productive? So it's those kinds of things. But the key is to say, I can't solve the new challenges with the old skills. So, and part of and it's understandable. A lot of people who are, I'll call them legacy IT people, all of whom are essential to running the business. The ERP systems, finance, HR, legal, compliance, those all have to be run. And a lot of those are on legacy systems, but they don't necessarily add new value, and they don't add new revenue and growth to the company. So that's the challenge. How do we rebalance the allocation of those resources and get the new skills and capabilities along with the funding to make them work for the organization?
That's terrific. You have a couple of concepts in the article that I'll mention here, and maybe a little bit of elaboration might help. You use the term inside, no, sorry, outside in versus inside out UI.
Right.
So what did you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the difference between user experience design and I mean, user interface design and experience interface design. Most of IT starts with the systems and technology they have and works it out. So we have this technology, what can we do with it? Okay. That was fine for as long as the institution was sort of in control of how they engaged with their employees, their customers, and this. Now the employees say, I don't want everything on my laptop. I want it on my iPad. I want it on my iPhone. I want it on my Apple Watch, whatever it is. Okay. Customers are saying the same thing. Nice that you have a branch. Nice that you have an ATM, but I want to deposit my check remotely. So it's those changes that have caused them to say, wait a minute, we can't keep doing it the same way just because we had control over it. So not only are the customers and employees and other stakeholders asking for new ways of engagement, but they've now gained control over that relationship. So the challenge that companies now have is how do we adapt to this? And so to me, that's why I think when you look at it from a skills point of view, there are three kind of interesting questions. The first is, instead of saying, okay, I've got my team, I'm losing somebody who's been around for, let's say we've had a development engineer who's been there for 15 years, he or she retires or whatever, and the position is open. The traditional approach is, well, how do we fill that position? As opposed to saying, is that what we need going forward? If that position has been maintaining a systems of record that is really not as efficient or as effective as we want it to be, what could that be replaced with? So you ask yourself, the first question that I do with all the CIOs when we do the talent assessment is to say, what do you want your IT team to be able to do next year that it can't do this year? Just start right there. Okay. So take artificial intelligence. Most people, when you ask that question, they say, we've got to get better at AI. Okay. So how do we develop those skills and capabilities? Part of it is on your team, are there people who are interested in that you can do a development program with to have them acquire those skills and capabilities? If not, then you have to externally go out and recruit them. But what happens often, and this is why, and we've talked about this before, it's really all the clients I work with are frustrated with search firms, because search firms just fill RFPs, and RFPs basically are filling the job that was vacated. They're not asking the questions that I just posed. And so part of the frustration is, where, if I'm an IT leader, can I get this, this exposure to new people and new ideas? And that's where I think you have to work with different resources, which we can talk about. But the key thing is to ask that fundamental question. What do we need to be able to do next year that we can't do this year in order to keep our company competitive?
Wow, it's a very interesting way to look at it. We also use a term in the article that's familiar, the notion of Agile versus Waterfall.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of Agile. So
Yep.
maybe can you speak to that briefly?
Well, part of that is just it's really that idea about experiments and learning. In Waterfall, most of these are for fairly large, and there's still situations where you can make a case to use Waterfall. We don't have to get into them today. I'm not saying that all Waterfall is bad and all Agile is great, but most Waterfall, IT programs are fairly complex, take a fair amount of time. So for example, if you're moving, and you know this because of the work you do, if you're moving your ERP system from on-premise on desktop to cloud and mobile, that's a whole different, that's a big enterprise. That's like a huge, some people call it lift and shift or a core conversion. Okay. So those are big fundamental things. A lot of the things that you need to do today aren't that big. So we don't want to put them through that sort of complex, elongated process of here's the plan, build it out, test it. But we got to go in and move. We have to change the cadence so that what Agile does is you can say, look, here's an idea. Let's build a prototype. Let's go test the prototype. And in 2 to 4 weeks, we'll get some feedback. Does the market have any interest in what we're talking about? Do our customers like it? Do our employees like it? Do our other stakeholders like it? So it's really a cadence kind of a thing. And it's a challenge because historically IT didn't move at that cadence. And so how do you help people who are much more comfortable in a logical step-by-step process get into this different sort of cadence? Because that's what the market really demands with all this digital disruption.
That's terrific. And I was thinking about Agile versus Waterfall in the light of software development. However, yours is more interesting concept in the light of IT and the projects that it pursues.
Well,
All
my
right.
guess is, I mean, there must be examples in some of the work that you've run into where you've helped your clients make that transition, I would think, right?
We do have some cases like that, absolutely. And maybe it's a little bit more fundamental than what you described, but there are times where I feel that clients should approach an ERP implementation in phases, not all at once. So we have an associate who has a CRM implementation service, and she does things on a monthly subscription basis over time. So not all at once in a 6 month time frame, but maybe across the
Right.
course of 2 years. So that concept, I think, fits into the Agile format fairly well.
Great.
You have some core questions that you pose to clients. So, for example, you mentioned one of those questions earlier on. What do you want your organization to do tomorrow that it can't do today?
Right.
It's a really good question. So, how do clients typically answer that question?
What they do is they, well, they first place they struggle because they haven't really thought about asking the question because they're so busy doing
Hmm.
their day-to-day stuff. So part of it is you have to create the environment. We do this through workshops and other things. But when you get the team together, and the other way of saying is it where are you struggling today? Where is the organization not getting the results that it wants? So part of it is, and another part of the work we do is historically IT worked in its own silo. And we've introduced an idea of a business partner relationship management program. And what we do in that program is the senior IT leaders are assigned to one or more of their internal business partners. So it could be finance, it could be marketing, it could be sales, it could be new product, whatever it happens to be. And what they do is they say to them, what are the things that are making it harder for you and your team to achieve the goals that you're held accountable for in the annual plan? What is it making it hard for you to do what you want to do? So that starts that conversation about what is it that we need as IT to be able. So if the answer is we need to be able to have an account opening in less than 20 minutes instead of 5 days, okay, that isn't solved by tweaking a system of record. That's solved by building a new system of engagement, okay? Or we don't have a clear understanding of what our customer really wants. Now we have to get into data and systems of intelligence and artificial intelligence and stuff like this because we don't know enough. So we're either guessing or we're just sort of flying blind. So part of it is a dialogue, but part of it is also the recognition that if we just continue to spend most of our time and money running the business, we're not contributing anything to growing the business. And until we can get over that hurdle, we're just going to be a cost center support function, which is adequate, but not certainly sufficient to be a real driver of having a company become successful as a digital enterprise. Without IT being in that sort of what I call driver's seat, you can't achieve that outcome.
Good, good. I think this is the crux of the article and our topic for today. So you also asked the question, what skills and capabilities are necessary to do that new work?
Right.
How do clients answer that?
Basically, they need one is the ability to understand the new technologies, whether they're systems of engagement or systems of intelligence. So part of the skills, and I'm sure you run into this with your clients as well. Most companies, well, I'll give you an example. All the data that was generated by all the companies globally in 2020, 2% of that data was utilized in 2021. So 98% of the data the customers have, that the companies have about their customers and the marketplace isn't even being used. So part of what you have to be able to do is to say, okay, if that's a need that we have, where do we find those skills? Who are the key people that we now? One of the challenges is, and we talk about talent, there are not a lot of data scientists out there, and the ones that are out there are getting scooped up by companies that are throwing all kinds of money at them. So if you're a sort of 10 to $20 million manufacturer in the Midwest, you're going to have a hard time competing for that resource. But so you have to now. Are there other companies out there that are doing that work, that vendors that you can talk to? Yes. But that's again where this exploration goes. Where can I find out more about how I can use more of the data that we have? What do I have to do? Part of it is getting the quantity of data better organized and accessible, the quality of the data, okay? A lot of it is, some of it's, over in marketing, some of it's in sales, some of it's manufacturing. It's all over the place. So, and it's very fragmented, and it's inputted by a variety. There are no standards. There's no governance. So there's a lot. It's almost like the Wild West. So you have to get that sort of organized and the discipline to be able to go in and access it and use it. So all those kinds of skills, one of which is just the appreciation that data is now a critical factor, not only in machine learning and artificial intelligence, but in just being able to understand what your customer, what your employee, what your supply chain partner wants and needs. And if we do that, if we can harness that and have the talent to leverage that, that's the step forward that we're hoping to help them with. And we do this. I mean, and the relationship management thing is great because now you're doing it. The key is the other people in the company ought to look at the IT group, and they ought to be able to say, when asked the question, how aligned is IT's investment portfolio with your goals? And they should say very aligned. In most companies, the answer is not aligned at all.
Sure. Okay, there's one more question I'm going to save for a little bit later, because we have another question that was related. So let me jump to this concept of a hybrid job. So we talked about this earlier. In this context, how would you define hybrid job?
Yeah, this is another big challenge, that is that traditionally, if you were a solutions architect, or you were a developer, or you were somebody that just wrote code, that's all you had to do. That was great. That was fine, and you did your job. The challenge now is that the hybrid job says, well, if I'm a project manager, for example, I'm not just running an IT team, I'm now running a cross-functional team because I need inputs from other parts of the company. If I'm a product manager, I need to be able to talk to the solutions architect or the developer, but I also have to talk to the business side. So the hybrid thing says it's a combination of technical skills and knowledge versus business skills and knowledge. And so part of the skills gap is you need to have IT people who do training on the business side of the house and business people who do training on the IT side of the house. And the fun part of the learning of it is, and so in some of the early exercises we've done with companies trying to learn about AI, we put together all kinds of different vehicles. We have an AI petting zoo where actually non-technical people can come in and literally play with the technology and get an and the reason we call it a petting zoo, everybody looks at, if you're not an IT specialist, you go, oh my God, I'll never figure it out, right? Well, it's not, it's very accessible. It's very visible. You just need a little help. You sit down and you start to play with it. You go, oh my gosh, look at that. No, that's how it works. Okay. And that starts the brain thinking, but it also starts the cross-pollination between the business side and the IT side. And so the hybrid jobs are the people that can make that connection, as opposed to operating independently.
Good. All right, very good. So now we'll double back to that question, which I postponed for this last bit, is about how to get the right people into the right places. You mentioned that you are not a strong proponent of using traditional search firms. Why is that?
Well, as I said earlier, search firms are really interested in, they're interested in getting paid to put a body in a seat. but they are what I would call RFP driven. So they get a proposal from a client asking for help to fill this position. In most cases, I don't mean to just throw all search firms under the bus. And I'm really not reflecting my own experience. I'm reflecting the frustration that my clients have. So I'll give you an example without naming the company. I worked with a VP of applications at a major software company, and after not hiring anybody for 3 years, he got permission to hire 34 FTEs. Okay, 34.
Wow.
6 months in, working with 3 different search firms, he'd filled 6 of the 34 positions. And the frustration was that they didn't understand. He was forward thinking. Now, so the key is you've got to be able to sit down and first and say, look, we now have an open FTE. Going back to that question before, what do we want the team to be able to do tomorrow or next year that we can't do today? That's what should go in that job description. So you have to rethink what you want to do. There may be some portions of the old job that still need to be done. They may be moved into another, aggregated with another position if it's maintaining the business. But the key is if you only get 2 or 3 people a year, they better be people that can help you grow the business, not run the business. And search firms just don't. So where do you go? Okay. So the first place I would go is to the best employees in the company, not only in IT, but across. Why? Because good performing people in the companies not only have the skills and capabilities, but they understand what it means in their culture to be able to deploy those successfully. Because just because you have the skill, if you're a very aggressive, forward-thinking person and you go into a very conservative culture, you're going to fail. Not because you don't have the skills, but because the culture isn't ready for your kind of approach, and vice versa. So start with your employees and just say, look, who do you know? You have networks of friends. You have all kinds of friends in different businesses. Who do you know that you think could be successful in our company? So I think that one's. The other one is there's been a fair amount of sort of building partnerships between public and private. So universities, other groups of people, military groups. Okay. People, because a lot of people might, they come out of the military and they're looking for good jobs and they've had good training and things like that. And I think it's just the recognition that if you just rely on outsourcing it to a search firm, getting all the resumes in, going through HR and all that other stuff, yes, can you find somebody okay with that? Probably. I've got another situation, and I won't name the company, but they wound up searching for somebody. They landed on the person, but because they didn't do any kind of reference checks, okay, they wound up having that person having to leave within 6 weeks because something turned up that would have turned up if they'd done reference checks. And so all the things that, that sort of go into how people traditionally do things have to be rethought, I think. And they have to just say, look, it's a new ball game. To be a digital enterprise, we have to have different skills and capabilities. Therefore, we have to figure out who we can bring in. And going back to your thing about a hybrid thing, maybe we bring a business person in to be the CIO and back that person up with subject matter expertise that report into him or her, okay? Because traditionally it's always, well, they have to have IT experience. They have to know about all the systems. Well, maybe they don't. Maybe there's a better contribution because they're a better bridge out to the organization than just somebody who has the technical skills. So, I mean, I don't mean to say it's just as simple as thinking. It's a challenge. It really is. I mean, you're changing a lot of mindsets that have been very successful for a long time, but the marketplace, as you well know, because you see it in your work, has changed so dramatically that that approach is no longer going to be effective.
All right, Peter, I think we've come to the end of our time. This is a fascinating discussion, and it's one that I think affects many, many organizations. So I want to wrap up here. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching today. And Peter, we'll do this again, another topic next time.
Thanks. Look forward to it.